All right. Good evening, everyone. It's me back again. I'm Leo, and I'm your former chairman and your current branch ambassador. And welcome to this webinar. First of all, I would like to say thank you, Julie, for organizing this. And thank you again, Deepu, for inviting me to be on board again. Today, I'm going to talk about leadership in the management of climatic heat-related risk. So I do not know if you're already familiar with this topic, but let's see what I can give you today. Let me start with this a little bit of things that can remind us about leadership. And it says that leadership is not something where one is called as an expert. It is a continuous learning. And so here we are, workplace leaders, and not just simple leaders, but leaders in risk and safety management. And be on board, join me, and enjoy the presentation. And you can come up with some questions later. So what you're seeing now is the United Nations Sustainable Development, and there are a number of things here that you see, and one of the prominent one here is climate action, and another one here is in number 10, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. There are so many things that you can see on the screen, but what I'm going to point out here is about our role when it comes to leading others in terms of climatic heat risks. And we all know that we are taking part in this United Nations Sustainable Development. But this is just to look at the big picture, because what we're going to narrow down is all about our workplace, is about the environment where we're in, and how can we lead others when it comes to climatic heat risks. So just some information that I was able to gather here. Uh, it's been noted that the climate change has brought to the increase of temperature at around 1 degrees Celsius, and it's considered as an average global warming so far. And the slight rise in the average temperature is causing a much steeper rise in record highs and very hot days. And it's not just that what we're experiencing in the Middle East is a summertime, but if you can notice that over these years, like, let me, I have some disturbance here, and if I can remember, about 18 years ago, when I first got here in Qatar, during this period, it's not supposed to be this hot as it was, but because of the global warming, then we are experiencing this. If we are going to translate this at the workplace, there's a question of how can we lead others when it comes to risk and safety. And it's also noted that weather stations around the world are recording a growing number of extreme heat events and record high temperatures, making the world more humid on the average. And I got this in one of the internet sites. Globally, it's also being noted that extreme heat killed at least 166,000 people between 1998 and 2017. This is according to the World Health Organization, including about 70,000 during a 2003 heat wave in Europe and in the United States. So there's a lot of information that we can get about global warming and climatic heat risk. So there's really a big question as to where are we heading for when it comes to leading others, first at the workplace, and if you think of beyond the workplace, what can we do as risk and safety practitioners, if not risk and safety managers in this aspect? Um, Lately, there's this article in Gulf Times saying that the United States is declaring that there will be an increase in global temperature from a range of 1.1 degrees Celsius to 1.8 in the next 5 years. So, my friends, my comrades in risk and safety, think about this 5 years from now. And as early as now, perhaps we can already ask about ourselves about what do we need to do starting today in terms of risk and safety if we're going to think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term planning in contributing to the workplace as risk and safety practitioners or perhaps risk and safety managers. What can we do as early as now? And this boils down to the concept of risk and safety leadership. And also another subject which I found in the internet, in the news, just a couple of days ago, is about this reminder from the Ministry of Public Health in Qatar. This has been happening already as part of the decision number 18, I believe, law number 18 of 2005 about the submission of work-related diseases and injuries. It's nothing new. It should not be new to us anymore, but it's a very good opportunity for us to look at where we are right now in terms of compliance and of course being familiar with all the laws, regulations, and best international practices. So, a subtle reminder for us: let's be reminded that there are laws and regulations that we need to comply with, and it's a good thing that the government of Qatar ensures that people, that the leaders, managers, and the workers alike are reminded of this. So, what do we really mean when we say climatic heat stress? I found this article, and the blue text, the third bullet point, is where I got my reference. This is all about climatic heat stress in construction sites. And if you take a look at this, this is all about a range of human factors that starts from heat-included illness and exhaustion leading to impaired capability, whether it's physical and mental, thereby resulting the productivity of the worker, and worse is affecting their abilities to survive the workplace. And this is also an occupational characteristic of construction work in many climates. And the author of this article is taking the approach of re-engineering the whole safety management system rather than just focusing on the incremental improvement, which is really what's happening at the construction industry. If you look at this article, you will get to notice that it's also a subtle reminder for us about the way we lead our colleagues, about the way we stand or we put the principles and practices of heat stress management brought about by the climate change. So these are the determining factors which contributes. These are enumerated in 6 points, which are the air temperature, humidity, radiant heat, wind speed indicating the environment, metabolic heat generated by physical exertion, and of course PPE, if you may consider it at the workplace. But if we are going to narrow this down, we can bring this into three different factors, which I will also be talking later on as I progress through my presentation. So these are just individually identified factors which determines heat stress, wherein our risk and safety leadership may be required to for us to have a review, for us to have a starting point, taking into consideration the next 5 years climatic uh, environmental change, which will for sure affect the workplace. And climatic heat risk, um, really, I do not know, especially for people working outside, how can we stand the high ambient temperature? But of course, we always say that there's always training and education that we can do. But the question is, where do we stand? Where do we stand when it comes to our leadership? And it's it's noted that in some high income countries, in some high income countries, uh, the attention of the government is one of the many things that we can really appreciate, especially providing a budget to educate the people and to adjust the work timing, taking into consideration the amount of input of the workers, the amount of output as a result of the day's work, and how can this balance between realities of workers, productivity, the entire sphere of the project. And of course, there's also a consideration when it comes to healthcare. As we all know that failure to pay attention to simple things that workers may experience from heat stress can also cause untimely deaths of the workers. And well, we really don't want that to be experienced by our colleagues. But the thing is, we need to pay attention to this very important climatic heat risk. So, as I mentioned earlier, those six enumerated determinants or factors can be broken down into three. And I placed them as personal factors, job factors, and environmental factors. So, when it comes to personal factors here at the workplace, we can talk about how the behaviors are anchored in their safety practices. Well, you can talk about BBS or behavior-based safety practice, and then the job factors about how would people identify the hazards and their associated risks, and of course, similarly, the environmental factors. How do we educate our people to become more aware of what's happening in the environment, or otherwise how can they contribute to improving the environment? And as part of our learning, we talk about the hierarchy of controls, and engineering controls are one of the important things that we can say it can contribute to workplace environmental factors. But beyond that, there are still so many things that we can do, which boils down to the competence of everyone involved at the workplace, competence from leadership and the workers' competence. So there are so many things that we can get as information, and which can help us become learned or educated when it comes to preventing heat related illness. So like for example, the issue about acclimatization, and here we can talk about the leaders, administratively speaking. How do our leaders exercise or put in place policies on acclimatization? And then how do we keep our workers well hydrated? Where do we establish our education process when it comes to bringing the policies down to the workers? And of course, educating them about prevention of heat-related illnesses. I know there are some places, like for example, in the water closets, you can see that some workplaces are educating their people when it comes to the color of their urine, which can determine how much water do they need, or when do they need to get rehydrated. And also policies about uh, taking time to rest and cool down. So these are just examples of leadership in climatic heat risks that we can say they are just available. The question is, how much of our time do we spend in ensuring that we stay well informed about climatic heat risks? So you can see here the source of this information, and you can use this for your personal purposes. So I, I I was trying to search for some information here in Qatar that we can say it's imperative that we abide by the law of the country, and this is what I found. The Ministerial Decision number 17, and this was published just last month, April, and it's talking about heat stress legislation in Qatar, guide for employers from the Ministry of Labor. So this repeals the Ministerial Decision number 16 of 2007. This is available online. You can just type this and you can have this information downloaded, and there's another information also, guide for employees. So take note of this, and those who are based here in Qatar, especially for us here in Qatar branch, we can use this information. So the ministerial decision number 16 of 2007 stipulates that, excuse me, from June 15 to August 31, the work done under the sun or in open workplaces must not be more than 5 hours in the morning and must stop between 11:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. So what changes took place here is that the timing the timing here, that instead of 11 a.m., it's been changed to 10 a.m., a little bit earlier. So, guys, think about this. What's going to happen to us 5 years from now, where we are anticipating the increase of temperature from 1 degree to 1.8 degrees Celsius? So, I really do not know, but as early as now, I can just think of our contribution to risk and safety practices, and how much information do we need to study about how we can prevent the exposure of the workers, and then perhaps I do not know if we can involve in some research, we can involve in some workplace innovation. I cannot really imagine myself 5 years from now thinking about this climatic um, environmental change, with the anticipated increase in temperature, and how much it can affect the workplace. So here, the Qatar legislation says that the obligation for employers to prepare a risk assessment to mitigate the risk of heat stress. So here, I want you to look at the phrase to prepare a risk assessment. My question to you is, how much of us here have been really into the practice of risk assessment? We know that there are two sides of the coin here when it comes to where we stand: risk assessment and risk management. And we cannot deny the fact that nowadays there are training programs about risk management that have been commercially propagated, and it seems like they're so easy to acquire. But the question is the competence of individuals when it comes to the practice of risk assessment, and on the other end is the practice of risk management. So I'm going to encourage each and every one of us here to really look at the practice of risk assessment as part of our responsibility to the workers and our accountability to both the workers and the management in terms of managing such risk, mitigating the risk of heat stress as a result of climatic heat risks. And The third point here, as one of the main changes in the new ministerial decision number 17, is about the responsibility of the principal contractor to coordinate prescribed heat stress mitigation measures when two or more employers undertake activities simultaneously at one work site. So, in other words, here, sharing a workplace with not just one but more than one contract employers at the site. I did not get all the content of the ministerial decision. I just selected a few. And the fourth one is the adoption of the wet bulb globe temperature. So those of you who are exposed outside, this is another encouragement for us to study about the wet bulb globe temperature index to assess and monitor the level of occupational heat stress. And uh, we should take note that all work must stop if the WGT rises beyond 32.1 according to this legislation throughout the year. The fifth one is the specification of requirements concerning information and training of workers. So here, um, if you can remember in my past talks, I gave something about uh, risk and safety discipline, which talks about information, instruction, training, and supervision. So here, the legislation is talking about a specification of requirements concerning what kind of information, what kind of workers training in health and safety that people should be able to avail, such as the provision of drinking water. So again, one question here is what type of drinking water should we take? How much sodium content should be there in that water that we need to provide? As we all know, there's a number of commercially purchased water here in this country, and if we are not familiar with it in terms of the principles of occupational health, then we might end up just providing ourselves or others with drinking water, but it may not really satisfy the sodium requirement in relation to our environmental exposure. And of course, shaded rest areas and adequate or appropriate personal protective equipment. And the number six is the introduction of mandatory annual health checkups to diagnose and manage chronic diseases that may contribute to the risk of heat stress. So I leave this to you. Item number six. We need to understand that this is a what you call this health requirement, occupational health requirement, and it's talking about mandatory annual health checkups. And then lastly, the right of workers to remove themselves from specific situations when they have a reason to believe that heat stress is a threat to their safety or health. So it seems like we're talking about human rights here when we're talking about item number 7. So basically, these are the 7 items stipulated as main changes to the new ministerial decision number 17 of May 2021. And this is a non-binding document which builds on the information published by the Administrative Development, Labor and Social Affairs in 2019. And its aim is to provide further support to employers in Qatar on how they should protect the workers from heat stress, of course, in a hot environment while the operations is ongoing. And the evidence-based and practical solutions proposed in the guide will help each and every one of us to mitigate the risk of heat stress at the workplace in line with the national legislation and international best practices. So again, this boils down to risk and safety leadership. Now, when it comes to the socio-economic impacts of climatic heat risk, Um, there are 4 things here that we can take a look at as provided by this reference. Um, Economically speaking, socially speaking, climatic heat risk can affect livability and the workability. What do we mean by this? The way we consider our everyday lives and the way we execute our responsibility as workers of our organization, this can be affected. As we think about the next 5 years, there's this question of, will the workplace will still be a workable workplace? Will the place where we live in right now, will it still be the same livable place as it is right now? Not only that, but of course, if you have a group of workers in a particular place, they need food. We need food. So how can the climatic heat risk affect food systems? It can surely affect. So um, right now we can read in a lot of literature about people learning how to plant or how to plant vegetables indoors, because for sure there will be somewhere else in the world there will be scarcity of food because of the global warming. So again, how can that impact social and economic environment? Physical assets, um, our equipment as part of the operational elements. What else? The materials that we use. Do you think they will still be the same specifications, standards when we talk about increase in global temperature? And infrastructure services, those who are in facilities management, those who are designing buildings, they can also be affected. So my friends, if we look at these four um, enumerated items about its impact to the social and the economic environment, we can really say that as early as now we should be thinking of something. We cannot say that in few years time I'll be retiring, I'll be leaving this place, and I will be going back home to a tropical country. But of course, global warming affects all places in the world. So we're just talking about the workplace, but how about beyond the workplace? So really, it's kind of a challenge for us, not just the in terms of health and safety practice, but in general in risk and safety practice. Now, when it comes to leadership, I'm identifying here three areas of leadership where we can say we as risk and safety practitioners, we can start looking at uh, three dimensions of our operation and three dimensions of the workplace. So the first that I've identified here is the operational leadership. What do I mean when I say operational leadership? I'm talking about the frontline supervisors, the assigned foreman that takes care of the day-to-day work of a team or department. How does he lead others when it comes to climatic heat risk? So do we give this person some sort of responsibility only, or do we provide us alongside responsibility we give full support so that we can achieve our objective? And I guess there are some people here who are in the middle management. And the second item that I'm pointing out here is uh, the tactical leadership, where we have middle managers monitoring the implementation of policies, programs, and ensuring that national laws and regulations are implemented. And of course, when we're talking about the tactical group of leaders, they are the ones who bridges the operation and the strategic leadership. And lastly, the strategic leaders, where we have the policy makers within the organization, and they are whom we call the accountability holders. They are the planners, and they are the ones executing the plans, bringing them down to the tactical and operational leaders. So if this seems new into your eyes, please take a look at this and look at where you stand. Are you part of the operational leaders? Are you part of the tactical leaders? Or are you part of strategical leadership of your organization? And come to think of climatic heat risk, where you have responsibilities and accountabilities to the people and to the management in relation to the achieving the business objectives. And of course, another area that I want you to look at here are areas with regards to engineering solutions, when it comes to finding ways that we can contribute to our organization. So engineering, it does not really mean that you need to become a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, but from an engineering perspective, as one of the layers, or that one of the tiers of hierarchy of control measures. Like for example, have you been practicing hazard identification technique that before everyone starts to work, you teach them how to look above, below, behind, inside, and everywhere at the workplace? Can your workers tell you that do we have adequate ventilation? And if not, then we might need to improve by way of engineering our work area. Training and education. We all know that these are the foundation of our what to call this foundation of the objectives of every organization. And they can be mandatory in nature. They can be required to be a refresher on a periodic basis, and also the leadership in administrative perspective, where we have the supervision, we have the management aspect of our business operation. So again, these are areas in leadership of climatic heat risk that you and I should also take a look at, in relation to the levels of leadership, operational, tactical, and strategic. So, climatic heat risk management is a requirement for all of us, where we can monitor and control the impact of heat stress on heat strain, and in order to protect the workers from heat-induced illnesses, taking into consideration personal factors, not only in general, but at a very personal level, with regards to the health conditions of the workers, and as mentioned in the legislation, that the employer should be responsible for annual health check of their workers, and also managing the environmental factors and managing job factors. So if you look at here, there are two again, there are two ends that we're looking at. We're looking at the competence, or our competence in risk assessment, and our competence in risk management, so that we can really say that we are into heat risk management. And engagement of the operational and tactical or middle managers in assessing the risk can be helpful to, they can contribute to those people who are at the strategic level. So it's just some sort of asking ourselves, where are we right now? Again, I will rephrase this question. Where are we right now in terms of our competence in risk and safety? Okay. So I want you also to look at the leadership spectrum in our risk and safety practice. So we all know that this can be rearranged in any order, whichever you would want to have it. Occupational health and safety, HSEQ, or whatever. But what I'm trying to point out here is the spectrum of health and well-being. So again, there are risks that can affect the health and well-being of the worker, and it requires our leadership to be exercised to ensure that we are achieving the business objective of the organization. And when it comes to workplace safety and worker safety, we all know that safety is all about anticipation, recognition, evaluation, and control of workplace hazards. And in this talk, I'm pointing out the climatic heat risk that, as I've said, from the literature that we were able to source, we are anticipating a dramatic increase in the global warming. And so we need to recognize our needs as early as now, and we can be able to evaluate the level of risk. And as early as now, again, think about control measures that can mitigate the impact or the future impact of climatic heat risk. And of course, the environment. It's not only about the environment where we are right now, but and beyond. So if right now we are here in Qatar and we're thinking about that statement in the news about this dramatic increase in global temperature from 1.1 to 1.8 in the next 5 years. So you might be asking yourself, where will I be in the next 5 years, right? And then you cannot just say, well, the place that I'm going to retire is not going to be the same place that where I am right now. But can we hide from global warming? I don't think so. We can only hide from reality, but we cannot hide from it. And of course, when we talk about quality, how well is the leadership taking place when it comes to climatic heat risk leadership? So again, it's not just about where we are, that we are called as HSEQ professionals or practitioners, but it's all about the spectrum covered in our risk and safety practices. So we need to communicate this. And communicating heat risk is one of the underestimated reality by the public, including the workforce. We are always confronted by the situation in front of us, but the reality is we have underestimated this. And we are all contributors to what is happening right now in our environment, globally speaking. Um, I believe next month, 5th of June, will be the Global Environment Day. And I want you also to be aware of this and find out what information you can get from the theme of this year's Global World Day of Environment. And communicating heat risk can be very effective in reaching heat vulnerable people. So if you will ask me who are the heat vulnerable people, I can answer you straightforward: all of us. Why all of us? Because we just don't stay inside our houses, inside our offices. We can be outside, and there are other people who are more heat vulnerable other than us. And who are these people? These are the people whom we work with outside in the field, our workers. And my friends, we need to remember that heat risk communication it's imperative that this takes place before heat risk becomes a crisis. And I'm going to point out here, if I'm going to ask you, when did you start educating your people about extreme heat emergencies? You don't need to answer me here, but you can answer it by yourself. Because if you've started only last month, then I can tell you that's already late, right? It's just like saying, when do you fix your roof from leaking? Your answer is when it rains. So it's the same thing. It's already late if you're going to fix the leak from your roof when it's already raining. And it's already too late for us to say that we are educating our staff if we are just educating them in heat related emergencies by this time. So that's, well, allow me to use the statement, it's a failure in a heat risk communication. Because as I've said, let's avoid heat risk from becoming a crisis by communicating it at the right time. So what can be our role in risk and safety management? We need to have active engagement and active participation. Active engagement, we can study literatures. We can study the history of the workplace. We can refer to data and translate them as information, so we can be actively engaged and we can participate in managing the risk of climatic heat changes in the workplace and beyond. We can balance realities while we are trying to achieve business objective of of contributing to the organization's much achieved business profits. We can balance it by way of ensuring that people who are working for the organization are also being paid attention, and for us as well in the risk and safety practice, we are really doing what we are supposed to do. We can promote collaboration. Yes, there are times that we receive information late already. We can read in the news that there were such forum related to this subject, and it had already taken place, and we were not informed about it. So what can we do? Then we can be proactive by collaborating with the government agencies in ensuring that next time around we can be involved, and we can also agree on best benefit, the benefit for the workers, the benefit for the organization, the benefit for the environment. So this is where our role of leadership can really take place when it comes to managing the risk of climatic heat risks. So we need to look at our competence. Yes, indeed. That's true. That when we talk about competence, we're always thinking about skills, knowledge, attitude, training, and education. Translating it into experience, or otherwise better known in our previous health and safety education as SCATE. But in terms of climatic heat risk, we can be looking at competence in terms of expertise and thought leadership. So again, the bottom line here is leadership. And then we can look at our delivery or implementation, monitoring the implementation, and looking at the gaps in terms of plans, policies, and procedures, and also our competence in influencing other people and how diplomatic we are in handling the operational elements, operational leadership, and of course collaboration. How competent are we in collaborating with other agencies, and also in the delivery of business value, systems thinking. Are we part of a larger group? Not only we are just looking at the tree in the forest, but we are really looking at the entire forest or the entire organization. And innovation and development, we cannot just stagnate and say in the next 5 years we will end up in the same situation where we are right now, because we failed to innovate and we failed to develop something that can contribute to climatic heat risk. So if you look at this image that I'm trying to project here, what do I mean by this? On top of the iceberg is just what we can see: heat related risks brought about by climate change. But the reality is there's a much bigger um, hidden subject underneath the problem. So I guess you're also familiar with the iceberg theory of accident causation, and this is no different than what we know of about it. So again, the magnitude of heat risk leadership is just similar to what we know of an iceberg. We are just maybe we are just seeing what is obvious, but underneath the problem is a mounting problem that requires mountains of solutions, and our risk and safety capabilities or competence are also required. I want to leave this message for you before I end up with my talk. And climatic heat the risk can result to people engage in unnecessary suffering and death in the heat, especially with population and communities that are vulnerable and are oftentimes unrecognized. And among them are the workers out there. There are other heat-related effects, which includes reduction in occupational health, safety, and productivity, and an increase in illnesses and heat-related injuries. And also, we have physiological limits of heat tolerance, which are predictable, and other numerous contributing factors. We can substantially reduce these limits. And without investing in innovation, in education, in research and risk management actions, you know, we can just expect that things can just get worse, and it will be associated with workplace morbidity and mortality. So that's my presentation to you about climatic heat risk leadership. And I'm going to challenge you to ask yourselves, where are we right now in our risk and safety practices, which we can say we can have a medium term to long term vision about what's going to happen in the next 5 years if we will still be at the workplace. So thank you very much for your attention to this talk, and I guess Julie will facilitate any question that may arise in this forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leo, for another excellent presentation. I'm sorry my voice is going. I've got really bad hay fever, so hopefully you can understand me. We've not had any questions in as yet. Reese, if you're with us, do you have any questions for Leo?
Yeah, just one thing. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just one thing. Thanks very much, Leo, for very informative presentations. You mentioned risk assessments regarding the use of the wet roll globe thermometer. Yes, you're right. That will give you a heat index. When I looked at this before, and I did some work on it, one of the key things that you need to also add are the two other parameters, and that is the metabolic rate of the individual that you're monitoring, such as their workload. So you may get a heat index from static monitoring, but there are factors that you need to consider if the work is light, medium, or heavy. And I think there's a weighting scale that goes with it. The other factor is that you can add to your wet globe thermometer readings is the type of clothing the individual is wearing as well. And once again, there are factors that you can include if they're wearing shorts, t-shirts, overalls, or a jacket. And there are some useful charts that you can use for that. The other thing you mentioned was about risk assessments, and I'm glad that you picked up on competency, because the legal requirement is that you have to do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. And what that means that it digresses from doing desktop risk assessments. And what it means is by suitable is the risk assessment has to be suitable to the task. Sufficient, you need to involve competent persons. You need to involve the safety person, the project manager, the supervisor, and the individual actually performing the work. And that's how you get around that criteria of a legal requirement to do a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. And what it means is that you can't just sit on a desk, use a computer, and start writing out and throwing out risk assessments. So they're the only two things that I wanted to support you, add to your presentation. Is one, when you're doing heat stress index and readings, you need to consider those other two parameters that I mentioned, and suitable and sufficient risk assessments. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Reese.
You're
Great,
welcome.
thank you, Reese. We don't have any more questions, so that just leaves me to say a huge thank you again, Leo, for your really great presentation. Thank you for giving up your valuable time. And thank you to Reese and the rest of the Qatar branch for putting on this programme of webinars. We hope to see you at next month's webinar. For those who want certificates, your certificate will be sent out this time tomorrow. And for those colleagues of yours who may have missed the presentation, it will be uploaded onto the IIRSM YouTube channel probably tomorrow. So I'd like to wish everyone a good evening or a good afternoon wherever you are in the world. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.